All right, Alexander, let's talk about the 2024 presidential election. The campaign is getting underway, not only for Republicans, but for Democrats as well. And we should be getting an announcement from Joe Biden, at least that's what he's led us to believe, where he announces that he is running again for president. And that would put him up against Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah,
Your
exactly.
thoughts?
Well, I mean, first of all, this is not, I am convinced, the original plan. I mean, I think the plan back in 2020 was that Joe Biden would become president. He'd keep the seat warm, but, he's old. Let's face it, he's not the man he was. I don't think that's very controversial anymore. I mean, he's the man who talks to trees, falls down steps, collides with lampposts, misses his way through speeches, jumbles up his words, does all of these things. He hardly gets very angry for no good reason at odd moments. I don't think most people in the US feel that he's remotely the right person to be president at this time. But the idea was you get Biden to knock out Trump. We're not going to relitigate the 2020 election. There's an awful one could say about that. But you get Biden in, he keeps the seat warm, and the person who then takes over is Kamala Harris. I am convinced that was the original plan, except that Kamala Harris has failed utterly. She's been a complete failure. So they can't agree on anyone else. Biden himself has now very strong reasons for wanting to remain president because there's investigations of his son. Those investigations are apparently starting to gain traction. The Republicans in Congress are sort of homing in. He's probably worried about things beyond that. And of course, one should never overlook the factor of vanity as well. So there's no one else. They don't have a credible alternative to Biden who will stick to the neocon globalist line. So they're left with Biden because Kamala Harris failed. So that's why I think he's going to come out and say that he's a candidate. And of course, he's now up against Robert Kennedy Jr. And I think on any objective assessment, Robert Kennedy Jr. ought to be a strong opponent. After all, he's a Kennedy. He's an intelligent man. He's an articulate man. He's got traction with blue-collar voters in much of the United States. He's taken positions on the COOF that many, many Americans agree with, including many Democrats agree with now. He ought to be a strong candidate. But you see that just a few hours after he appears on Tucker Carlson's show, Tucker Carlson on Fox is out. So, you're going to see an awful lot more of that over the next few months. Every single stop will be pulled. Every single wire will be pulled. Every single scheme and plan and project that they can come up with will be resorted to in order to make sure that Robert Kennedy Jr. doesn't succeed or doesn't even make an impression against Biden, and that Biden is thrown into battle once again with all the media closing ranks behind him, everybody pretending that, America has a vigorous, dynamic president and a popular president when even most Democrats don't want him to stand. But that's the only way they can see to hold on to the White House.
Yeah, the Kamala plan failed miserably. They tried to balloon test Pete Buttigieg for a little bit, but then you had that train, the train accident, and the environmental disaster, and Pete Buttigieg was just a complete no-show there, and so he was out of it, and they're left with Biden. They don't have anyone else to go with. That's it. So they have to run Biden again. And here's the fear that the deep state, that the permanent Washington faces. Robert F. Kennedy versus Trump.
Yes, that's
They
the
can't
ultimate.
have that. No, that's the ultimate fear. And that is why, I mean, there's a lot of theories why Tucker Carlson was fired. I believe that is why he was fired, because Tucker Carlson was willing to platform Trump and give him a voice, and he was willing to platform Kennedy and give him a voice. And for me, the permanent Washington deep state, they can stomach Trump versus Biden. They can stomach Robert Kennedy versus DeSantis even. But Trump versus Robert F. Kennedy for them is unacceptable. And so they have to make sure that Trump and Robert F. Kennedy appear on zero mainstream media channels or outlets. And I'm sure they're going to do the same thing for big tech. And they're going to try to vanish these two candidates, because they can't have a presidential election with both of them representing the two opposing parties. It's unacceptable for them. That's why they got rid of Tucker, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I've no doubt of it. I mean, absolutely no doubt at all, because there is no other reason. I mean, some people have suggested it's this big lawsuit that the Fox News organisation has settled, but that's absolute nonsense. And if you look through the disclosure documents, you can see that Tucker was not in any way to blame for that. So that's not the reason. The reason is the one you just said. It is because of the fact that he hosted Kennedy, and that was just going too far. That was unacceptable. They weren't going to allow him to do that again, either with Kennedy or with Trump. And for that reason, he had to go. So they spoke to the Murdochs, who will always do what the established power wants, and Tucker has gone. Of course, Fox is going to see his ratings collapse. That I have no doubt, because for me, he's the major draw to Fox. But I mean, that's not something the deep state worries too much about. And you're quite right; they'll be
Fox
working. They'll get work with the social media companies and all the rest. Of course, they will.
Yeah, Fox will just be like CNN, MSNBC. It'll be the neocon version of CNN and MSNBC, and it'll have the same ratings, the same viewership, and that'll be that. Could you imagine a 2024 election campaign with Trump and Kennedy running against each other, while Tucker Carlson is talking about the failure that was Ukraine, the shenanigans that were going on in the election in 2020, talking about the coup, talking about all of these things? They were never going to let it happen.
Absolutely,
They're not going to let it happen. And
I might have imagined it if this was the America that I remember, say in 1970 or 1980 even. They're never going to allow it today. I mean, that is absolutely out of the question. In some ways, I think Robert Kennedy Jr. is even more scary to them than Donald Trump himself is. I'm not saying that they're not absolutely scared of Donald Trump, but he's a known quantity in some ways. And the difference between Trump and Kennedy is that up to this point, they've had a reasonably solid Democratic Party. If Robert Kennedy Jr. divides the Democratic Party, if he rallies what you might call the old Democrats of the party, don't just mean old in terms of age, but the people who have the kind of sentiments that used to draw people to the Democratic Party when it was the party of JFK and people like that. Well, they can't let that happen, because with the Republicans now having a very strong populist conservative wing, the very last thing they can risk is to see the same thing happen to the Democrats. So they're going to pull out all the stops to block Robert Kennedy from gaining traction with American voters, and that means that they're going to try to cast him into limbo. In other words, cut off all oxygen to him and to his campaign. And he's going to struggle. I mean, he's going to find it an extremely difficult task indeed to break through. Whether he can succeed, of course, is another matter.
Well, where there's a struggle, there's going to be an opportunity, and they're going to they're going to vanish him from mainstream media. Okay, he won't appear on any mainstream media channels. They're going to vanish Kennedy and Trump from all social media, big tech. But there are going to be two platforms that could benefit greatly from this, and that is Twitter and Rumble.
Yes, I agree.
If they see the opportunity, because as we approach 2020, just like 2024, just like in 2020, there's going to be a huge surge of interest in following the stories of the election, of the presidential candidates and the election and debates and all of these things. So the platforms that show the people everything, all the candidates, all the speeches, all the debates, they're going to be the ones that are going to benefit in a big way.
I completely agree with that.
I can only see two. I can only see two: Elon Musk and Rumble. Yeah,
and Rumble, and I completely agree with that. And they might, they might see that, and they might achieve the breakthrough. I mean, if it doesn't happen, I mean, go back to 2020, and I mean, you had Tulsi Gabbard's campaign, which, well, I don't think she had quite the traction that Robert Kennedy Jr. does, because she didn't have the name that, she doesn't have the Kennedy name and all that, but when she was exposed to voters, they liked her, but they made sure that she wasn't seen. If you remember, she was consistently pushed into the background. I mean, she wasn't even invited to the convention, if you remember, despite having more delegates supporting her than some of the people who were invited to the convention. So that's the trick they want to pull off with Robert Kennedy Jr. It can only work, though, if all the social media giants agree. If some of them don't, and Rumble was not the force in 2020 that it is today. I'm not even sure whether it existed in 2020. I presume it did do, but on a much smaller scale than today. And of course, Twitter was a completely different. I mean, it was run in a completely different way in 2020 than it is today. If Rumble and Twitter break the monopoly, then of course this could be a very interesting election in 2024 indeed. But already you can see that the pressure on Elon Musk especially is building. I mean, and there's threats against Matt Taibbi. He's been threatened with imprisonment. I mean, things which are incredible in the United States, but those threats are being made, and you can see why.
Yeah, they're afraid. They're afraid. Absolutely. All right, we will end it there. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Rockfin, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.